The Euthanasia roller coaster. I'd read about it online, but I didn't think it really existed. Surely not. It was too far-fetched, too ridiculous, like something out of a Tim Burton movie or a bad dream. Then I got the invitation. It came in a black envelope. My name was scrawled on the front in silver ink. How did they find me? Something about the heavy black paper envelope made my heart sink, even deeper than I thought possible. I thought I'd been broken beyond repair, stripped of any humanity, but holding that envelope, knowing what it held before I even ripped it open, that was when I knew. I dropped the rest of my mail on the curb, left the mailbox door open, walked straight to my desk and pulled out my letter opener. I pried the blade under the envelope's slit, and the paper split easily. Satisfying, like scissors cutting through wrapping paper. A thick, black sheet of paper slid out. The silver letters seemed to shine, sparkle, and collide together into fuzzy auras that caused my eyes to blur. And then I realized I was crying. Through my tears, I read the words: dignity, elegant, meaningful, and euphoric. I flipped the card over. On the back, imprinted into the paper and filled with rich silver ink, was the silhouette of the roller coaster. It looked just like I remembered from the article I read online. The track climbed straight up, a staggering 1,700 feet, if memory served. It crested at the top, briefly, then curved down towards the ground in a sickening drop, straight down. At the bottom of the hill, the coaster tracks curved sharply up in a giant loop, 7 loops in total, each slightly smaller than the one before. The 10G force was designed to drain the blood from your brain, to kill you in a moment of sheer, euphoric lunacy. My fingers traced the imprint, following the track up, down, and around each loop. I closed my eyes, a single warm tear rolling down my cheek and landing on the card with an audible plop. The tear landed in a flat puddle, then dissolved into the paper, stretching out until it was a flat water ring that blurred into the silver ink that outlined the roller coaster's final loop. The silver ink puddled, and when I swept it away with the edge of my pinky, it spread across the card in a silver smear. I still held the letter opener in my other hand. I raised it, studied the glint of the silver blade in the gray afternoon sun. I could end it now. I didn't need to ride a roller coaster designed to rocket me into the afterlife. I could press the blade into my pulpy wrist. It wouldn't even hurt, I bet. I dropped the letter opener, and it fell to the glass desktop with a clatter that echoed through the air. No, I decided. I lifted the card, studying the imprinted track and silver smear. This was the only way. I just knew. I found the office easily. It was a black box plopped in a desolate stretch of desert. Behind it, the oil refinery sputtered inky black clouds into a gray twilight sky. Freshly poured asphalt, velvety black, led through the dusty desert, straight to that little box. The hot Texas air smelled heavy and toxic, like tar and oil, completely devoid of life. I pulled up to the little boxy building, and even though I knew I'd found the right place, even though my car's GPS unit chirped cheerfully, "You have arrived," I double-checked the address printed on the black card. It was the right place. I'd tied up all my loose ends, canceled my cable package, turned off the water leading to my house. I'd drawn out all my cash, stuffed a few bills into my wallet, and left the rest with a note on my kitchen counter. I left the front door unlocked, wondered, for a moment, who would be the first to find it. I didn't care. I'd started to pack a suitcase, but I realized I didn't need anything, so I put it back in the closet and left empty-handed. The drive wasn't long, 16 hours. I only stopped twice for gas. I opened my car door, choked on the toxic air, and felt heat prickle on the back of my neck. There was only one other car parked in the lot, a shiny vintage black Cadillac with a sticker on the chrome back bumper that read, crudely, "Keverkayan's got nothing on me." Thunder churned in the distance. I pressed open the door of the little box building. It fell open easily, and a chill of bitterly cold AC blanketed my flesh and goosebumps.
"Miss Myers."
A gravelly voice welcomed me. The room was cool and dark. Black velvet draped the walls. Silver light fixtures were affixed in all four corners, casting an eerie glow of pale silver light. A single desk was at the center of it all. A man sat behind it, dressed in a pinstripe suit. His hair was slicked back. Each of his fingers was adorned with a heavy ring, and he held an unlit cigar to his lips.
"Come sit, girl,"
he called. He spoke with a Cajun accent, polluted by a southern twang and a splash of whiskey.
"We both know why you're here,"
he told me, directing me to take a seat in the black velvet armchair in front of his desk. I obeyed.
"I need to know why you want this."
"Why?" I repeated, my voice surprisingly meek, airy, lifeless. "I thought you knew why. I thought that's why you found me."
"Never mind why I found you,"
he said gruffly, cocking his head on its axis, his meaty, swollen red neck, and grinning at me with a smile of silver-capped teeth.
"Why do you want to ride?"
"Ride? I didn't know what to say, how to justify what I felt, or how I knew that it was time to end things. I killed my son." I tried, my voice shaking. I swore I could see my breath in that thin, frigid air. "He was helping me in the garage." My voice cracked, my words eroding apart like pieces of land separating in an earthquake. "Helping me," I repeated. The word help was what destroyed me. Every time I said it, I hoped I would strip some of the meaning away, that I'd be able to say it someday without feeling anything. But it never worked. Every time I said, "helping," I remembered those piercing blue eyes looking up at me, underneath the fringe of the sloppy bowl cut his mother had given him. The constellation of freckles over his nose, the gummy smile, missing 2 front teeth. "I want to help, Mommy," he had said. "Help, help, help, help." He wanted to help me in the garage. I choked, feeling help get caught in my lungs, caught in my stomach, caught in my throat. I've replayed the moment over and over again in my head, I said, because this part was easier. It was easier to explain the facts, the narrative that had been recorded and transcribed into a police report. It was easier to rely on jargon and hyperbole and cliches. It was easier to say things like, "I turned my back for 1 second," or "I don't know how it happened." I'd said those words so many times that they'd lost meaning. But helping still destroyed me. Thinking of his sweet, pure soul, all he wanted to do was help. I'd collapsed onto my knees, sobbing, my face soggy with tears, and my head pounding with the dull ache of guilt. A heavy hand landed on my shoulder.
"All right, sister,"
he said, patting heavily.
"All right."
"Let me go now," I begged. "I need it. Please, let me leave."
"There's a mandatory wait period,"
he said. His voice was flat. No sympathy, no emotion, but no judgment either.
"Minimum of 12 hours. Earliest you can ride is tomorrow morning, 6 a.m.
I can't wait that long. 12 hours inside my head. 12 more hours thinking of his face, His freckles. The word help.
I'll give you the address.
He told me, tapping a pen onto a piece of paper. I felt him place the paper in my hands, and his hand was back on my shoulder.
I'll see you tomorrow.
I found a cheap motel on the edge of town. I was on the second floor. The yellow curtains in my room were open, and I looked out into the night. I looked out onto the parking lot, where a tiny shithole of a pool had been carved out of the asphalt, illuminated by the red buzz of the neon motel sign. A couple of kids played, shouting into the night in Spanish, even though it was long past their bedtime. Where are their parents? I wondered. Why isn't anyone looking after them? I laughed, taking a heavy chug from a gallon of whiskey that I had bought on my way to the motel. The irony. Beyond the pool, the oil refinery provided its own constellation of stars in the night sky. I could see a plume of black smoke against the moonlight. I fell asleep with my face pressed against the motel door, and a picture of my son in my hand. I jolted awake at 4 a.m. It was still dark, and the parking lot had gone silent. No more splashing in the pool. No more exuberant cries in Spanish. I showered, but realized halfway through that I hadn't brought a change of clothes, so I put my old clothes back on. They stunk vaguely of tar. It felt appropriate somehow. I left the motel room key on the bed and walked down to my car, started the GPS, and plugged in the address that I'd been given just hours earlier. It was 4:20 a.m. I wasn't running late. If anything, I'd be too early, but I felt a rush of panic, a listlessness. I sped along the mostly empty highway, passing workers driving the opposite direction towards the refinery. I was driving towards the desert, away from civilization, into the black sky, untouched by streetlights. After I'd been driving a while, the sun appeared like a lick on the edge of the horizon, lighting the sky a pale, ruddy red. It burned across the edge of the flat desert, rising higher and higher into the sky. There was nothing but miles and miles of flat, dirt desert in all directions, until the beam of pale morning light illuminated the ghostly silhouette of the coaster. An involuntary shiver rocked down my spine, and I felt a wave of nausea so strong that I swerved to the side of the road. As soon as the car came to a stop, I flung myself out and vomited into a cloud of settling dust that my tires had kicked up. I wiped the sick from my lips and got back into the car, staring up at the black coaster frame. I shifted back into drive and moved forward. There was no going back. I'd made up my mind. I parked alongside the coaster, feet from the tracks, and got out of the car. A single seat sat on the tracks, with the shoulder harness open and waiting expectantly for me. I turned towards the track, my eyes climbing the ascent. It was straight up, and I felt another wave of nausea prickle through my body. I don't even like roller coasters, I mused out loud, and I laughed dryly. I thought it was a laugh, anyway, but it came out more as a dry heave. The taste of stomach bile filled my mouth. I heard dust scatter and an engine roar, and I turned to see the Cadillac approaching. The door slammed, and the man I'd met the night before lumbered out towards me.
Fine morning, isn't it, sister?
He asked. He walked with a limp. Each step was preceded by a black cane stabbing into the dusty desert floor.
You haven't changed your mind, have you?
He asked. No, I said solemnly.
Good,
he said. Another body emerged from the Cadillac. A tall, awkward boy with comical features, ears big enough to be jug handles, and a nose marked with craterous pockmarks.
You'll have to sign this, then,
he said to me, and he pulled a packet of thick white paper from the inside of his jacket.
Don't bother yourself with reading it if you're sure,
he told me, and handed me a pen. It was a cheap Bic pen, I don't know why I expected something nicer for the occasion. Something inky or smooth.
People are always stealing my pens,
He told me, reading my thoughts. Where would I go with it? I wondered. I wouldn't be leaving this place, would I? Which reminded me. Here, I said, throwing my keys to the pockmarked assistant. I finished signing the paperwork and handed it back to the man. He put the paper back in his jacket, then raised his cane towards the ride.
After you.
He told me. The sun had nearly risen all the way, and I felt the prickle of heat burn the back of my neck as I climbed the steps onto the roller coaster's platform. The lone black seat looked even more haunting as I approached it.
You'll have one last chance to change your mind,
The man told me, pointing to a red button positioned next to the seat's harness.
You can press that any time during the ascent, but once the car crests the top of the hill, then your mind has to be made up, because there's no coming back.
I understand, I told him.
Right then.
He said, and he looked awkwardly at me for the first time, as if there was something more he wanted to say, or felt compelled to say, but couldn't quite figure it out. I felt awkward too. This wasn't as elegant or dignified as I imagined.
Whenever you're ready,
He said, and pointed me into the seat. I'd waited for this moment for so long, but suddenly I felt my legs turn to molasses, moving slow, as if my body was severing itself from my mind. A resistance. I sat down in the cart, and the pockmarked assistant worked quickly to strap me in. He silently positioned my hand in front of the stop button.
Let us know when you're ready.
I heard the man say from behind me. I couldn't see him, but I imagined him standing with his arms crossed over his cane, an attempt to send me off with some sort of dignity or respect. Just do it now! Questions flooded my head. Questions I should have asked the night before, but I didn't want to know the answers anymore. I just wanted it to be over. This is what I've been waiting for all this time, right? The coaster roared to life with a mechanical shudder, and the chain beneath the track started to clatter. I felt the car jerk forward, pulling me with it. Before I knew what was happening, I'd been whisked out of the station towards the hill. The chain lift jerked me up the ascent, my body facing the sky. I clenched my eyes closed, swallowing, my palms sweaty and shaking. I thought of those blue eyes, that fringe bowl cut, that sloppy, stubborn little face. I willed myself to cry. I wanted tears. I wanted to feel punishment, to know that this was the right decision. But the tears didn't come. I opened my eyes and realized I'd nearly ascended halfway up the coaster. In another 5 seconds, I'd be at the top, and it'd all be over. Why wasn't I crying? I deserved this, didn't I? This is my punishment, wasn't it? I had to pay for his life with my own. It was the only way. But I didn't feel anything. Help, I said out loud, waiting for the word to shatter through my selfish anxiety and final attempt at self-preservation. Help! I shouted, but I felt nothing. The car crested the top of the hill, and I felt the weight of my body slip away as it passed over the hump and faced straight down to the ground. No! Help! And this time I wasn't shouting it because I was remembering my son telling me that he wanted to help me. I was shouting it because I needed help. Stop! I don't want this! My sweaty fingers slammed at the button, but it was too late. The car was hurtling down the tracks, the metal screaming. I felt the blood rush out of my face, fill my veins, and my hands and legs became engorged. I felt my skin rip downwards, my eyes pressed into their sockets. My jaw disconnected under the force of the fall. I tried to scream again, but my voice didn't come out. I felt the chorus and my throat ripped to shreds as I suffocated. The force was too heavy on my chest. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't euphoria. This was manic suffering. This was hell on earth. I don't want this. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is a mistake. The first giant loop loomed on the track ahead. That's the last thing I remember. I opened my eyes, blinking and blinking until the blurry blob settled in my field of vision. My head throbbed wickedly, burning, pounding. My throat was dry, my lips parched. I tried to swallow, but my chest felt compressed. I opened my eyes again. This time, the scene settling around me. I was laying on a bed, a strange bed, in a motel room that I didn't recognize. Is this hell? I asked, dry breath crusting over my raspy throat.
Hope not.
A familiar voice cracked, and I looked over to see a man sitting on a chair in the corner of the room. It was so bright. It took me a moment for my eyes to settle, for my mind to recognize him. It was the man in all black, the man with the roller coaster.
Funny thing about suicide,
He said to me, using his cane to prop himself up. He limped over to my bedside and looked at me through Amber Lynn's sunglasses.
y'all go in with the same conviction, the same certainty. Y'all swear up and down it's the right thing, the only thing. Whatever your reasons are, your mind is made up and there's no talking you out of it.
He sat on the edge of the bed, his weight pressing against my legs. I felt a sigh of relief escape my lips. My legs were still there. I could still feel my extremities.
But every time, every single one of you changes your mind at the last minute. When the roller coaster crests the top of the hill, when the bullet escapes the barrel, when your brain cells start to swirl together like the colors in a peppermint. Because of all the pills you swallowed, it doesn't matter. You all change your mind.
How do you know that? I rasped.
I know it because I've been there.
He said, clicking his cane on the tile floor.
And I've talked to enough people that have been there themselves. Enough people who were blessed to fail at making the worst decision of their life.
So what was the point? I tried, but I choked and started coughing, my throat too dry.
The point of the roller coaster.
He finished for me.
Well, not a lot of people get the gift of a second chance, do they? How many times do you hear a bullet missing or someone surviving a jump off a bridge? Not many. You had made up your mind and you were going to go through with it, no matter what anybody said to you. Am I right?
I nodded.
You knew logically that killing yourself wouldn't bring your son back, but you decided you couldn't live with the guilt or regret anymore.
I nodded again.
I needed to show you something you'd regret more.
He told me finally. So what's the moral to the story? Now what?
Now what? Now you start over. You get a second chance. What you do with it, that's up to you. But I suggest you use it wisely, because not many people get what you have.
He stood up finally and made his way to the door, then turned back to me, as if he wanted to say something, but he remained silent. Thank you, I said finally, breaking the silence.
Maybe you can do the same thing for someone someday.
I will, I promised, and I meant it. And now, a word from the author. I'm blown away by the response this story has received. To everyone that has commented from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for the kind words, the shared experiences, the empathy and the understanding. Sometimes the scariest monster or the most terrifying demon isn't one that hides under our bed or lurks, waiting in the shadows. Sometimes the scariest monster is the one that dwells in the dark corners of our minds, given life by our brokenness. while childhood phantoms and boogeymen under the bed are easily defeated by turning on a light or confronting our fears, brokenness is a much harder monster to defeat, but it can be done. For anyone who has ever found themselves longing to ride the roller coaster, anyone who has wondered what it might be like to climb to the top and fall, don't let brokenness win. Even in the darkest night and the deepest pit of despair, you can find light. You don't need to ride the roller coaster to find your second chance.